Hey guys, tonight we ease into something both tender and strange. One of those stories where history hides in plain sight, waiting for someone to stumble across it years later. You're about to drift into the life of a woman who did something most of us could never imagine attempting. But don't worry, you're not really about to march with the Union Army. You wouldn't survive the blisters, the ration biscuits, or, honestly, the smell. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. The year is 1863, and the whole nation is fraying at the seams. The Civil War stretches like an endless shadow, swallowing fields, homes, and futures. You picture Gettysburg first, not the battlefield as we usually imagine, with maps and markers and tourists, but the raw earth. The broken fences, the torn-up orchards. The sound of cannons still hangs there, echoing in memory. Somewhere among the thousands of names carved into loss is a man whose story barely lingers, except that he was deeply loved. He fell in that chaos, and the ripples of his absence pushed one woman to make an extraordinary choice. She was a widow now, still young, still strong, but hollowed by grief. Her black dress clung like a uniform of sorrow, a reminder to every neighbor of what she had lost. Widows of the Civil War were not rare. Thousands of women wore mourning, but her path would not stop at veils and whispered condolences. Imagine her sitting in a small wooden chair, the kind that creaks when you lean back too far, staring at a pair of boots by the door. Her husband's boots, heavy, mud-stained, with the soles worn thin from marching. They don't look inviting. They look like work, like war, like pain. And yet, she begins to wonder if they might carry her someplace he no longer could. Historians still wonder exactly when she made the decision. Was it in a rush of anger at the unfairness of it all? Or was it in the long, quiet nights when grief had no one else to talk to? What we do know is that she decided to step out of the role society handed her, and into one she would have to invent for herself. But for now, you don't need to hurry. You lean back, breathe slower, and picture the widow's world. Warm lamplight, ticking clocks, the faint smell of wood smoke. The war is out there waiting, but the first step is simply imagining the courage it would take to lace up someone else's boots and walk straight into. The black dress rustles when she moves, heavy fabric pressing against her skin like a constant reminder. You can almost hear the weight of it, that scratch of mourning cloth as she steps carefully through rooms that feel too large without him. Every corner of the house holds a trace of her husband, an unfinished mug of coffee once left behind, the faint polish on a pair of buttons, the faint smell of pipe tobacco lingering long after the smoke has gone. When word first arrived from Gettysburg, the house must have seemed both too full and too empty, full of silence, full of pitying glances from neighbors, full of questions no one could answer, and empty because the one voice she longed to hear would never echo in the doorway again. You imagine the funeral customs of the era. Women in black veils walked slowly to church, holding handkerchiefs damp from both sweat and tears. The widow's weeds, as they were called, weren't just clothing. They were a rule book written in thread. Society expected her to wear mourning for months, even years, depending on her station. Black gloves, black ribbons, black everything. You couldn't slip quietly back into life without everyone noticing. And she felt that weight. Every neighbor knew what she had lost. Every trip to the market was a reminder. Even the children in the street grew quieter when she passed by. Grief wasn't private. It was displayed like a uniform. But grief has its strange companions. Some widows became steel-hard, focused only on survival. Others leaned on families trying to rebuild slowly. And a rare few looked at the emptiness left behind and thought, perhaps I can fill it by stepping where he stepped. Perhaps the best way to keep his memory alive is to walk directly into the world that took him away. This widow's name isn't shouted in textbooks, which makes her more haunting. She wasn't a Clara Barton tending to wounds or a famous nurse photographed for the papers. She was just one woman, sitting by a window in a black dress, listening to church bells toll, asking herself how to live when life had already chosen her role. One accepted truth: the Battle of Gettysburg claimed more than 5,000 casualties in 3 days, turning fields into graveyards and leaving thousands of women widowed overnight. One lesser-known detail: many widows carried locks of hair from their husbands, braided into rings or tucked in lockets, small anchors of memory. Historians still wonder if she carried something like that with her when she made her choice, a hidden keepsake even a soldier's disguise could not strip away. You sit with that image for a moment: the black dress, the empty boots by the door, the silence stretching out around her. Somewhere in that silence, her next step was already waiting. The scissors lie on the table, catching a faint glint from the lamp flame. You picture her hand hovering above them, steady but not certain. Cutting one's hair in the 1860s wasn't just about style, it was identity. A woman's hair was called her crowning glory, a public badge of femininity. Long braids meant respectability, devotion, patience. To shear it off was to step outside those boundaries, into something almost unthinkable, but she was already outside of them. Widowhood had pushed her into exile from the life she knew. The quiet of her home wasn't peaceful, it was hollow. Her husband had marched into war, and she sat with the echo of his absence. Maybe she thought, if the war took him, it can take me too. At least then I'll be walking beside him, in spirit, if not in body. So she lifted the scissors. The sound of hair being cut is softer than you'd expect. A muffled snip, a sliding weight, the feel of strands slipping down to the floor. You imagine the locks pooling around her feet like a shadow she no longer wanted. When she finally looked into the mirror, the reflection staring back was not a grieving widow. It was someone else. Short hair, sharp jawline, eyes that carried both fear and determination. Historians agree that dozens of women disguised themselves as men to fight in the Civil War. They bound their chests, darkened their skin with dirt or soot, practiced speaking in lower tones, and chose new names. She was one of them, a widow who reshaped herself into a soldier. You might wonder how she practiced. Maybe she studied the way men walked in town, the way they slouched or carried tools across their shoulders. Maybe she tucked a pebble in her shoe to remind herself to change her gait. There's a quirky detail worth picturing. Some disguised women reportedly practiced spitting just to blend in better, because apparently in a 19th century army camp, you weren't convincing unless you could spit with confidence. And still, questions linger. Did she tell anyone? Did a sister, a cousin, or a friend know what she planned before she vanished into the Union ranks? Or did she slip away alone, leaving neighbors to whisper about the strange widow who disappeared one day, her mourning dress left behind on a chair? Historians still wonder, because the records don't say. What you can feel, though, is the quiet shift, shedding the veil, dropping the black fabric, pulling on trousers that didn't quite fit, boots that pinched, a cap that shadowed her face. With every layer, she was building armor, not just against bullets, but against the gaze of a world that wasn't ready for her. For you, sitting here now, it's a strange kind of bravery to imagine. A choice born not from glory or patriotism, but from grief and stubborn love. And with that choice, the widow in black had disappeared. A soldier had stepped into the world instead. The boots are stiff and unwelcoming, as though they know they weren't made for her. You picture her tugging them on, the leather cracking at the seams, her toes pinched where his had fit more naturally. The trousers sag at the waist, the shirt hangs too loose, the jacket scratches her skin. Nothing about the disguise feels comfortable, yet she wears it like a shield. The enlistment line stretches before her. Men shuffle nervously, adjusting belts, coughing into hands, whispering about battles they've only heard of in newspapers. She keeps her gaze down, shoulders square, heart hammering harder than it ever has. Her voice, when called upon, is quieter than theirs, but steady. She offers a name that is not her own, some plain, forgettable man's name. And with that, the Union gains another soldier. Now, the daily rhythm of army life begins to shape her. Dawn bugles tear the sky open before she's ready. Mess tents fill with the smell of burnt coffee and bread, hard enough to chip a tooth. Marching drills stretch on endlessly, rows of boots pounding dirt in awkward unison. You imagine her trying to match the stride, to let her steps fall heavy, to mute the small signs that would betray her. One accepted truth: the Union Army required men to march 20 miles in a day when needed, carrying muskets that weighed around 10 pounds and knapsacks crammed with supplies. That weight pressed into every muscle, leaving shoulders raw and feet blistered. For her, the load was doubled, not just the gear, but the constant tension of disguise. And there were small quirks too. Uniforms weren't standardized, so many soldiers wore whatever pieces they were issued, often mismatched, sometimes comically so. Some marched in shoes that didn't match in size, some patched trousers with old quilt fabric. She may have blended more easily than you'd expect, lost in a sea of ill-fitting clothes and tired faces. But imagine the adjustment, the sounds of men joking crudely at camp, spitting in the dirt, scratching at lice, laughing too loud after a sip of whiskey. She had to join in just enough, without letting her guard slip. Did she laugh when they laughed? Did she force herself to curse, even when the words felt foreign on her tongue? Historians still wonder how closely she mirrored their world, and how often she feared the mask would crack. You feel the ache in her shoulders as she shifts the musket from one side to the other. You hear the steady crunch of boots across gravel, the dry taste of dust rising from the line of march. You smell the sour mix of sweat, leather, and wood smoke clinging to every coat. These are the details of soldiering that one could have prepared her for. Yet here she is, step after step, keeping pace. The widow has vanished, and in her place is a soldier with blistered heels, dust in her lungs, name she must answer to, whether she believes it belongs to her or not. The camp settles under a dome of smoke, the smell of burning wood mixing with boiled beans and the sour tang of sweat. You picture tents lined in uneven rows, some leaning like tired men themselves, others sagging where ropes gave way. A bugle has already faded into the night air, replaced by the clatter of tin cups, the hiss of grease, the low murmur of voices trying to wind down. She sits close to the fire, but not too close, careful to keep shadows on her face. Sparks leap upward, drifting like fireflies before disappearing into the dark. Around her, men laugh, argue, tell the same stories they told yesterday. Soldiers have a way of repeating themselves, as though each memory is a camp ration that must be stretched until it's thin. She chuckles when they chuckle, her voice low, her hands steady. One widely accepted truth: soldiers in both armies spent far more time in camp than on the battlefield. Weeks, sometimes months, of drilling, eating poor food, mending gear, and waiting. The campfires were places where the war shrank into small routines, where fear could be masked by a joke or a song. And within that small world, she held her secret like contraband. She learned to sleep with one arm over her chest, to turn her body away when men stripped shirts in the heat, to dip into the woods alone rather than risk questions. Even laughter had to be careful. She couldn't let it rise too high, couldn't let the softness of it betray her. The quirky detail here is worth imagining. Some women in disguise supposedly bragged more than the men, swore louder, and made themselves rougher than they really were, just to avoid suspicion. It's easy to picture her spitting into the dirt and pretending it felt natural, or throwing a curse into the smoky air when the beans burned again. Still, danger lingered with every flick of firelight. A careless gesture, a wrong note in her voice, a button undone at the wrong moment, and her disguise could unravel. Historians still wonder how close she came, night after night, to slipping. How often another soldier's eyes lingered too long, suspicion just beginning to form before some distraction turned it away. You listen to the sound of their boots shifting on dirt, their tin spoons scraping bowls, their laughter rising and fading like waves. You smell the ash on the wind. You feel the heat of the fire soft against your face and the cool air at your back. These are the moments that made the disguise both easier and harder. Easier because she blended into the crowd, just another tired soldier staring into flames. Harder because she was always aware that she didn't belong, always watching herself from the outside. The camp quiets eventually, men pulling blankets over themselves, muttering last words before sleep. She lies down too, heart still beating a little faster than the rest, listening to the hum of snoring around her. And in that sound, the chorus of exhaustion. The musket rests heavy in her hands, longer than her arm span, heavier than it looked when others carried it. You picture her shifting the wooden stock against her shoulder, the barrel tilting forward, her feet planted wide in the packed dirt of the drill yard. The sergeant's voice barks commands in sharp bursts, and each one feels like a test she cannot afford to fail. The first time she lifts it, her arms tremble, but she hides the effort in a grunt that blends with the rest. The weapon weighs about 10 pounds, not counting the cartridge box, the bayonet, the canteen, all of which drag at her body throughout the day. She learns to balance the load, to let her hips absorb the sway, to march until the sound of boots on earth becomes a rhythm she can't escape. One widely accepted truth: Civil War soldiers drilled endlessly. Hours of shoulder arms, present arms, fixed bayonets. They repeated the motions until they became muscle memory. The army believed discipline on the field came from repetition, from transforming individuals into a single moving machine. But for her, repetition meant something different. Every drill was another chance to convince the world she was who she claimed to be. Every smooth movement was proof she belonged. Every stumble carried the risk of exposure. A lesser-known detail adds texture here. Recruits often practiced with makeshift wooden muskets when there weren't enough real ones to go around. Some men carved their own from fence rails or tree branches, marching with clumsy imitations until proper weapons arrived. You can imagine her relief if she ever trained with one of those lighter, easier to manage. A small break from the strain of carrying steel. Still, historians wonder what the sergeants thought. Did anyone notice her build, her face, the way her voice cracked differently than the others? Or was the chaos of war enough to mask her differences? The officers too busy molding hundreds at once to scrutinize one quiet figure at the edge of the line. You hear the snap of commands, forward, march, and the ground trembles under the weight of boots. Dust coats her tongue, sweat stings her eyes, the musket presses bruises into her shoulder. Yet she pushes through, because each step forward isn't just soldiering, it's surviving. And when the drill finally ends, the sergeant dismisses them with a grunt. She wipes the sweat from her brow, just like the rest. Another day passed. Another chance to breathe in smoke and dust and pretend this was exactly who she was meant to be. The first time the guns roar in battle, the sound is not like thunder. It is sharper, closer, a tearing of the air that rattles through her bones. You picture her crouching low, musket pressed against her chest, the smell of gunpowder heavy in the throat. Men around her shout, stumble, reload, fire again. The ground shakes not just from cannons, but from the chaos of hundreds of bodies moving at once. There is no chance to think about her disguise now. No one looks closely at anyone when smoke rolls thick and vision shrinks to the space in front of you. The disguise protects her simply because no one has the time to notice. She fires when they fire, reloads as quickly as she can, biting the paper cartridge, pouring powder, ramming the ball down the barrel, snapping the cap into place. The motion repeats until it feels like she's been doing it her whole life. One widely accepted truth: muskets of the Civil War were slow to reload. A skilled soldier might manage 3 shots per minute, but in the blur of battle, that rhythm often collapsed. Clouds of smoke filled the field, men fired blindly, and chaos ruled more than order. A lesser-known detail: eyewitnesses described the smell of battle as overwhelming, an acrid mix of burned powder, churned earth, sweat, and fear. Some even said the haze of smoke and dust turned day into a kind of strange twilight, where it was hard to tell friend from foe. You imagine her blinking against that murk, heart pounding, body straining, wondering if she'd even know when the enemy was near. And here's the lingering question historians debate: how did women like her cope with the physical toll? Did adrenaline carry them through? Did they deliberately hang back, firing from the rear lines? Or did some throw themselves forward with reckless abandon, hoping no one would ever doubt them in the heat of action? You hear it now, the crack of rifles, the boom of cannon, the cries that rise and fall. Her boots sink into mud, her shoulder bruises again from the recoil, her hands grow raw from ramming the rod. And still she fights, not as a widow or a woman, but as a soldier, standing in line with the rest. When the firing finally slows, when the smoke begins to drift, and voices call out in confusion, she is still standing. The disguise has held. She has done what was asked of her. And though her heart races, though her ears ring, though her body aches from strain, she blends once more into the weary ranks, just another face smeared with dirt and powder. The battle smoke clears, but silence does not return. Instead, the camp hums with the soft shuffle of men writing letters home. You can almost hear the scratch of pens on paper, the pause of a hand hovering mid-sentence, the sigh of someone trying to find words that don't exist. She writes too, but her letters are never sent. Her words are folded small, tucked away in the lining of her knapsack, hidden in the pockets of her jacket. They are not meant for the postmaster, not meant for mothers or sisters or sweethearts waiting back home. They are written to him, the husband buried at Gettysburg. The letters spill with things she cannot say aloud. Lines about the endless marching, about the way her shoulders ache beneath the musket, about the laughter around the campfire that she joins but never truly shares. She writes about the hunger, the cold, the fear that gnaws at her when cannons sound in the distance. And sometimes she writes about memory, the way his hand felt when it closed around hers, the way his boots sounded on the floorboards of their home. One widely accepted truth: soldiers clung to letter writing as a lifeline. The Civil War produced billions of words in letters, more than any war before it. They were treasured, carried into battle, read until the paper wore thin. But here's the lesser-known detail: some letters were never mailed by choice. Soldiers kept them folded in their pockets, as if the act of writing was enough, even if the words never traveled. For her, the letters were both diary and prayer, unsent because the one she addressed them to was already gone. And still, A question lingers. Did anyone ever find them? Historians wonder if her secret might have been revealed through those folded scraps, if, tucked into government records, there once existed a bundle of words written in a hand, too delicate, too personal, for the man she claimed to be. You picture her crouched by lantern light, the tip of her pen trembling as she forms each line, then tucking the paper carefully away. Around her, men seal their envelopes, joke about sweethearts waiting, ask one another for stamps. She stays quiet, smiling faintly, hiding her letters in silence. The camp grows dim, lanterns snuffed one by one. The sound of boots and laughter fades, replaced by the hum of crickets and the distant call of an owl. And she lies down, letters pressed close to her heart, words unsent but never wasted, carrying her grief into another restless night. Friendship in the ranks is a strange sort of glue. You can feel it here, men leaning shoulder to shoulder on logs, trading stories that blur fact and fiction, swapping rations, teasing one another just to pass the long hours. In this world of tents and muskets, bonds form quickly, as though hardship accelerates the process of trust. She is there among them, always careful, always measuring her words. She laughs when they laugh, nods at their jokes, sometimes even adds one of her own in a voice roughened by practice. They call her by the name she invented, and hearing it day after day makes it feel real, even to her. One widely accepted truth: camaraderie kept many soldiers alive. In letters and diaries, men wrote about brotherhood, about sharing blankets in freezing nights, about the strange comfort of never being alone. The Union Army wasn't just a machine, it was a web of connections that helped men endure. But there's a quieter detail. Some friendships grew so close they raised eyebrows. In the smoke and strain of war, boundaries blurred. Some soldiers wrote about dear companions whose absence left them hollow. Historians debate how much of this was simple brotherhood and how much carried a deeper, unspoken intimacy. For a disguised woman, that closeness must have been both comforting and dangerous. Imagine her sitting by the fire with one soldier in particular, maybe sharing bread, maybe humming along while he strums a fiddle. Did she allow herself to lean into the warmth of that bond? Or did she keep her heart armored as tightly as her secret? Historians still wonder. We will never know if she risked letting someone glimpse beneath the surface, or if she kept every friendship firmly at arm's length. You hear the murmurs of conversation now, low voices tumbling into laughter. Someone tells a story about home, a farm, a sister, a field of corn so tall it brushed the sky. Someone else brags about battles won, though his details shift with every retelling. She nods, she smiles, she listens, and all the while, she stays on guard. In these friendships, she finds both shelter and threat. They make the nights shorter, the hunger easier to bear, the marches less lonely. But they also bring eyes that look too closely, questions that could cut too deep. Still, she carries on, weaving herself into their circle like a thread in a patchwork quilt, blending just enough to stay warm without unraveling. The surgeon's tent glows like a lantern in the dark, its canvas walls lit from within by flickering lamps. You can almost smell it before you even step closer, a sharp mix of alcohol, sweat, damp cloth, and iron. Soldiers dread that glow. To them it means pain, amputation, sometimes a one-way trip to a shallow grave behind camp. For her, it means something more, the looming risk of exposure. She knows if she ever ends up beneath that canvas, the surgeon's hands won't just probe wounds, they'll strip away the disguise she's built so carefully. Every fever, every cut, every cough carries that danger. So she avoids the tent as if it were a trap. One widely accepted truth: Civil War medicine was crude. Surgeons worked with bone saws and morphine when available, but antiseptic knowledge was limited. More men died from infection than from bullets. To be wounded was often worse than to face battle. A lesser-known detail: soldiers sometimes faked illnesses to escape duty, but others, like her, must have hidden sickness instead. Imagine her biting back a cough, swallowing down fever, pressing cloth against a cut, and praying it wouldn't fester. Hiding injury was its own kind of bravery, its own silent battle. Historians still wonder, did she ever come close? Was there a night when fever nearly broke her strength, when she lay trembling in her blanket, refusing to call for help? Did any comrade notice, offer water, sit by her side without realizing the secret he was protecting? You picture the surgeon's tent again, the muffled groans inside, the clink of instruments, the dark stains on cloth. She stays outside of it, hovering on the edge, doing everything she can to remain unseen. Her disguise is not just clothing, not just hair shorn short. It is survival itself, and stepping into that glow would risk everything. So she walks past quickly, keeping her head down, pretending she has no need for the surgeon's tools. And when she lies in her tent that night, she presses a hand against her ribs, feeling the ache she dares not name, whispering to herself that tomorrow she will still rise, still march, still hold her secret close. The camp grows restless as night falls, but not with fear. Tonight there is music. Somewhere in the rows of tents, a fiddle begins to sing, thin and sharp at first, then swelling into a tune that bends through the air like smoke. Tin cups tap along the rhythm, boots stomp in uneven beats, voices rise in half-sung, half-shouted songs. You see her there, sitting cross-legged near the fire, shoulders hunched slightly, face hidden in the shadows. The music tugs at her despite herself. She hums softly, lips closed, careful never to let her voice betray its true pitch. Around her, men belt out lyrics, verses they all seem to know by heart. The songs are bawdy, rowdy, sometimes silly, sometimes sad. And for a moment, even war feels far away. One widely accepted truth: Civil War camps were filled with music. Soldiers carried fiddles, banjos, and harmonicas. Songs like "The Battle Cry of Freedom" or "Tenting Tonight on the Old Campground" stitched themselves into memory. Music was both escape and glue, something to hold the men together through mud, hunger, and fear. The quirky detail: some songs were nonsense, filled with jumbled rhymes and jokes about officers, food, or lice. Soldiers loved to parody popular tunes, swapping in words that mocked their own misery. You can almost hear a verse about hardtack biscuits breaking teeth, shouted with more joy than despair. Did she join in those silly refrains, letting herself laugh just enough to blend in? It's easy to picture her tapping a boot in time, careful, always careful, but allowing a flicker of real joy. Still, historians wonder what she felt in these moments. Did the music bring her comfort, reminding her of dances back home, or did it sharpen her grief, stirring memories of her husband's voice singing by firelight? Was she able to lose herself even for a verse, or was every note another reminder of what she was hiding? The fiddle plays on. Men lean back, eyes half closed, as if the notes could lift them out of mud and smoke into someplace cleaner, freer. She listens, steady and still, holding her secret, even while her heart sways with the tune. And in that quiet, her disguise becomes almost invisible, not because she has hidden it perfectly, but because music softens every edge. When the song ends, the fire crackles loud in the pause, and laughter breaks out again. She smiles faintly, not too wide, just enough. Another night has passed, another secret held, another verse added to the strange ballad of her life in uniform. The first bite of winter arrives not with snow, but with the slow, creeping chill that seeps into bones before dawn. You picture her pulling her thin blanket tighter, breath fogging in the air, toes numb in boots that were never meant for frost. The canvas of the tent does little to block the wind, and every flap and seam becomes a crack for the cold to slip through. Marching grows harder now. The ground stiffens underfoot, boots striking frozen ruts that jar the knees. Fingers ache on the musket barrel, stiff and clumsy when reloading. Campfires burn low, fuel scarce, smoke stinging the eyes more than usual. Men huddle close, sharing warmth, sharing misery, sharing silence. She huddles with them, always careful, always guarding the small barrier between herself and discovery. One widely accepted truth: winter campaigns were brutal. Frostbite, pneumonia, and starvation claimed more lives than bullets. Soldiers shivered in threadbare coats, wrapping feet in rags when shoes fell apart. The cold became an enemy as fierce as any Confederate line. A lesser-known detail: some soldiers roasted coffee beans on tin plates just to warm their hands, even when they had no intention of drinking it. Others stuffed straw into their uniforms for insulation, crunching with every step. You can imagine her improvising too, sewing scraps into her jacket, tucking paper or cloth beneath her shirt, doing whatever it took to keep herself alive and unnoticed. Historians still wonder how disguised women managed in these conditions. Did they share blankets under cover of night, risking suspicion? Or did they endure alone, shivering quietly at the edge of the group? Did kindness from fellow soldiers ever save them? Or did fear of discovery force them to refuse comfort they desperately needed? You feel the weight of the cold as she marches, breath burning in her lungs, hands raw and cracked, joints stiff. Every mile stretches longer, every step heavier. But she does not fall behind. She cannot. To stumble would be to invite eyes upon her, questions she cannot answer. The nights grow longer, the frost thicker, and yet, with every frozen dawn, she wakes and rises with the rest, carrying her musket, carrying her secret, carrying the quiet determination that has kept her moving since Gettysburg. Winter presses in, but she endures, as she always has. A tin plate catches her reflection in the faint light, and for a moment she forgets to look away. The face staring back at her is both familiar and strange, cheeks hollowed by hunger, hair cropped short and uneven, dirt smeared like war paint across her skin. She sees neither the woman she once was, nor the soldier she pretends to be. She is something in between, caught in a space that doesn't quite belong to anyone. The mirror, if you can even call it that, offers no mercy. The jaw looks sharper than she remembers, the eyes harder, but beneath the surface she still recognizes herself, still feels the pull of widowhood in the corners of her mouth, the sorrow that refuses to fade even beneath the disguise. One widely accepted truth: soldiers of the Civil War often had little access to mirrors. They shaved when they could, usually with dull blades, and washed when streams or buckets allowed. Most men grew beards and mustaches simply because there was no time or means to keep them trimmed. A lesser-known detail: some soldiers used spoons or polished belt buckles as makeshift mirrors, peering into warped metal to check their faces. You can imagine her doing the same, turning a spoon in the firelight, squinting at the distorted image, half hoping not to recognize herself at all. And here lies the question historians still ask: how did women like her carry that dual identity without losing themselves? Did they begin to feel more at home in the disguise than in their former lives? Or did the disguise deepen the sense of dislocation, a reminder that they belonged fully to neither world? You imagine her lowering the plate, setting it aside, brushing dirt from her hands as though wiping away the glimpse she just saw. Around her, men grumble about rations, laugh about lice, complain about officers. She joins in, shoulders square, voice roughened. The reflection lingers in her mind though, echoing like a question she cannot answer. Who is she now? The night air presses cold against her skin. She pulls the jacket closer, stretches out by the fire, and closes her eyes. The face in the tin plate fades, leaving only darkness and the steady rhythm of breath. Tomorrow, the soldier will rise again. The widow waits quietly, tucked just beneath the surface. The war is cruel, but it is not without its tiny mercies. You picture her sitting cross-legged near the fire, patching a rip in another soldier's trousers with thread pulled from her own spare shirt. Her stitches are neat, faster than his would have been, and though no one remarks on it, the men notice. They just chalk it up to practice. Some fellows were handier with a needle than others. Food is scarce, yet she shares what little she has. A hardtack biscuit, broken in half and passed quietly to the man beside her. A spoonful of beans stretched just a little further so no one goes without. These gestures build trust, even if they draw attention she'd rather avoid. One widely accepted truth: life in Civil War camps depended on small acts of kindness. Soldiers traded tobacco for coffee, socks for buttons, jokes for silence. The rough edges of war softened a little when men looked after one another. The lesser-known detail: some soldiers carried sewing kits called housewives, rolled bundles of needles and thread tucked into pockets. Men weren't strangers to mending their own clothes, but some were clumsy with it. Her careful hands, her quick fixes, may have gone unnoticed in the moment, but perhaps a comrade later wondered why she seemed so deft. Historians still wonder about those exchanges. Did she leave behind traces of her gentleness in a world that demanded roughness? Did anyone suspect her secret simply because she offered more comfort than most men dared? Or did they simply accept it, grateful for one soldier who seemed to carry more patience than the rest? You see her now, squatting by a pot over the fire, stirring slowly so the beans don't stick. A soldier beside her cracks a joke about the food, and she smirks, handing him a ladleful anyway. Another brings a torn sleeve, and she mends it while they talk of home, her needle moving steady while her ears take in the stories. The night grows quiet, except for the occasional cough, the creak of boots, the crackle of fire. She tucks her needle away, leans back, and feels the small satisfaction of survival, hers and theirs. In these little kindnesses, the disguise softens, not by breaking, but by becoming something more than a mask. For tonight, she is not just soldier, not just widow, but caretaker too. Whispers travel faster than boots on a march. You picture them curling through camp like smoke, half jokes, half wonders, never quite said aloud but never fully silenced either. The men notice things: the way she eats a little more quietly, the way she avoids certain rough games, the way her laugh doesn't always match theirs. At first, it's nothing. Soldiers always speculated about one another. Who was a runaway farmhand? Who had lied about his age? Who was secretly married and hiding it? Suspicion was part of camp life. But sometimes, the whispers grow closer to truth. One widely accepted truth: both Union and Confederate armies contained women disguised as men. Documented cases exist of women discovered only when wounded or killed. Others were unmasked during inspections or by sheer accident. The fact that it happened means suspicion wasn't impossible, it was part of the landscape of war. Here's a quirky detail: some soldiers swore they could spot a woman by the way he washed his face in the morning too carefully, too thoroughly. Others claimed it was the hands too small, too nimble, or the way a voice cracked wrong in a joke. Of course, most of this was guesswork mixed with boredom, but you can imagine her heart pounding whenever such jokes drifted too close. And still, historians wonder, did any of her comrades suspect and choose to remain silent? Did someone piece it together, glance once too long, and then look away out of respect, affection, or simply exhaustion? Or did she manage to stay just on the edge of suspicion, never enough evidence to tip the balance? The whispers move like wind through the tents. She hears them, though no one speaks them directly to her face. A glance here, a smirk there, a pause in conversation when she approaches. She keeps her shoulders square, her voice steady, her stride deliberate. To deny suspicion, she simply lives as though it does not exist. Night falls again, campfires flicker low, and the murmurs fade into snores. For now, the secret holds, but the air is never entirely still. The smoke of suspicion always lingers, thin but sharp, a reminder that one wrong slip could unravel everything. The bugle sounds, and another day begins with boots scraping mud and muskets slung across tired shoulders. You walk beside her in imagination, step for step, along the churned road lined with ruts and puddles. The march stretches on, mile after mile, the horizon always just far enough away to feel unreachable. Her pack digs into her shoulders, the straps rub raw against skin already blistered. Each step presses stone and grit deeper into the soles of her feet. And yet she keeps moving, eyes fixed forward, the rhythm of marching as steady as breath. One widely accepted truth: soldiers during the Civil War often marched 20 miles a day, sometimes more, with little rest and less food. They trudged through heat, rain, and snow, often leaving bloody footprints behind. The war was as much about endurance as it was about battles. Here's a quirky detail. Some soldiers tied onions to their belts, not for food but to mask the stench of sweat and leather. Others tucked cards into hats to pass the time, playing quick games during halts. You can imagine her watching these rituals, maybe even mimicking them, weaving herself into the pattern of camp life, one habit at a time. But the open question remains: how did she sustain such grueling marches while carrying not only her gear but also the constant weight of her disguise? Did determination sharpen her steps, driving her forward when exhaustion threatened to expose her? Or did she risk falling back, forcing herself to push beyond her own strength just to avoid notice? The road never ends. Trees blur into one another, towns pass like ghosts, and the sound of boots against earth becomes the drumbeat of survival. Sweat mixes with dust, coats grow heavier, rifles feel like anchors. Still, she walks. She always walks. And in this endless march, she becomes less a figure of secret sorrow and more a shadow among shadows, one of thousands trudging towards some unknown tomorrow. For her, each mile is not just a march through war, it is a march deeper into a life she never expected to claim. The world cracks open in thunder. You can almost feel the ground tremble as cannon fire shakes the air, a deep roar rolling through your chest. Smoke billows thick and acrid, stinging your eyes until everything blurs into gray. The sharp tang of gunpowder clings to your tongue, dry and bitter, and shouts rise in waves that crash against the steady rhythm of musket fire. She is there, musket raised, heart pounding not just from fear but from the need to remain unseen, unmasked. Around her, men drop to their knees, reload with frantic hands, rise again to fire into the haze. She mirrors them, every movement practiced, every gesture rehearsed until it blends into the rhythm of survival. One widely accepted truth: battles of the Civil War were chaos embodied. Lines collapsed, men broke rank, officers shouted over the roar, and the smoke could become so thick soldiers sometimes fired blind. Most veterans later said you didn't see much. You felt it, heard it, smelled it. A lesser-known detail: sometimes birds fell from the sky during battles, struck down not by bullets, but by the shock waves of cannon blasts. Soldiers wrote about it with eerie detachment, as if even nature itself was caught in the storm. You can almost imagine her noticing such a thing, a brief flash of wonder in the middle of horror. Historians still wonder what it was like for disguised women in these battles. Did they fight with the same fury, or did the dual pressure to survive the fight and preserve the secret make their courage sharper? Did the disguise shield them by turning them into shadows among thousands, or did it double their fear, knowing discovery might come not from an enemy's bullet, but from a comrade's glance? The smoke thickens, orders blur, men charge, stumble, cry out, vanish into the chaos. She moves with them, steady, focused, the musket hot against her palm. Every shot is a secret fired into the storm, every step another gamble. And then, as suddenly as it began, the noise thins. Shouts fade to groans, cannon fire to echoes, smoke to drifting shreds. The battle has passed for now. She lowers her musket, chest heaving, ears ringing, still standing, still hidden, still carrying the silence of a double life through the thunder of war. The battle leaves behind more than silence. You can almost see the field after, torn and broken, the air heavy with smoke and something sharper, something that lingers in the throat. Soldiers slump where they can, heads bowed, hands trembling. Some tend wounds, some search for comrades, some simply stare at the ground as if waiting for it to speak. She moves among them, face pale beneath soot, jacket stained darker in patches she pretends not to notice. Her body aches in every joint, but the real burden sits deeper, something raw, something unspoken. She does not cry, she cannot, but in the pause after chaos, grief presses heavy, and she carries it as surely as her musket. One widely accepted truth: Civil War battles left fields littered with not just the fallen, but the stunned survivors, too numb to speak. Many soldiers wrote of the eerie quiet that followed, when the noise stopped and only the wind seemed to move. A lesser-known detail: some men, unable to bear the weight of what they'd seen, began carving or whittling bits of wood into crosses, stars, or simple shapes, right there on the field. A nervous craft, a way to occupy trembling hands. Perhaps she too reached for a twig or scrap of cloth, not for utility, but for distraction. And here lies the question historians still ask. How did women like her process loss in a space where grief was expected but never softened? Did she hide her mourning within the collective silence, or did she feel it sharper because she could not weep as a widow, only endure as a soldier? Did the mask make her stronger, or did it trap the sorrow inside her chest with no safe way out? The day wanes, the sun lowers, painting the smoke in streaks of copper and ash. She sits by a tree, musket across her knees, head bowed as if sleeping. But she is not asleep. Her thoughts circle like crows, dark and restless, never landing. The battlefield does not end when the cannons fall silent. It lingers in every breath, every step, every heartbeat after. Tonight, she survives again. Tomorrow, she will rise again. But tonight, the grief is hers alone, hidden beneath the uniform, locked beneath the disguise. The war lurches on, but rumors of its end drift like fragile smoke. You walk with her now through camps where men talk less of battles and more of home. Porches waiting, fields to plow, kitchens warm with bread. Letters crinkle in hands, passed and repassed, words smudged from folding and unfolding. She listens, sometimes nods, sometimes smiles, but rarely speaks of her own home. For her, home is no longer what it was. She keeps marching, keeps fighting, keeps hiding. Days bleed into months. The secret never slips, though the weight of carrying it presses heavier with every mile. She has lived two lives for so long, widow and soldier, that they have woven together, indistinguishable in the rhythm of war. One widely accepted truth: as the Civil War dragged into its later years, desertion rates rose and morale sank. Soldiers grew weary, clinging to rumors of peace like lifelines. Even the thought of an end was enough to soften long marches. Here's a lesser-known detail. Some soldiers began collecting wildflowers along the roads, tucking them into caps or pockets, pressing them flat between the pages of letters they never sent. A small act of hope, fragile and fleeting, carried through mud and gunpowder. Can you see her doing the same? Fingers brushing against a bloom, pausing just long enough to tuck it away. But historians still wonder, when the war wound down, what did women in disguise hope for? Did they long to return to their old names, their old clothes, their old roles? Or did the soldier's life cling too tightly, making return impossible? Was the mask, once survival, now too much a part of them to set aside? The campfire glows dim. Men whisper of going home, of freedom, of life after. She stares into the embers, the flicker painting her face in lines of orange and shadow. The war may be ending, but what comes after for her remains a mystery even she cannot answer. Tomorrow, perhaps, the bugle will sound for peace. But tonight, the soldier still sits by the fire, musket close, secret closer, waiting for whatever dawn may bring. The war finally exhales, long and ragged, leaving silence in its wake. Soldiers drift homeward, uniforms worn thin, eyes older than their years. Towns greet them with bells, with cheers, with tears. Farms regain their hands, kitchens their laughter, streets their noise. The country is fractured but breathing again. And she does not return as she left. Her disguise has become her skin, the soldier's gait her walk, the soldier's habits her instincts. When the musket is set aside and the uniform folded, she is not quite the widow she once was, and not quite the soldier she pretended to be. She is something else, a figure unpinned from expectation, belonging to neither world completely. One widely accepted truth: after the Civil War, the government discovered records of women who had fought in disguise. Some were noted in pension files, others in medical reports, their names surfacing only because death or injury forced recognition. Their stories were rare but real, preserved in fragments. A lesser-known detail: years later, some newspapers published astonished articles about lady soldiers, marveling at the hidden bravery of women who had marched beside men. Often these stories appeared decades after the fact, long after the women themselves had passed away, leaving only rumor and astonishment in their place. And historians still wonder, what was her name? Did she live quietly in some small town, carrying her secret to the grave? Did she tell a neighbor, a friend, a family member who whispered the story onward? Or was she discovered later by the slow grind of government paperwork, her file opened by a clerk who blinked twice at the revelation? You imagine her older now, gray in her hair, lines at the corners of her mouth. She sits in a rocker on a porch, eyes far away, watching the dusk settle over a quiet street. The war is gone, her husband long buried at Gettysburg, her soldier's name folded into history's margins. No cheers, no monuments, no medals, just a quiet life, shadowed by a secret only she truly carried. Her story was never meant to be found, and yet it was, pieced together in fragments, half remembered, half astonished. The forgotten widow, the hidden soldier, the woman who lived two lives in a time that could barely imagine one. The fireflies drift in the dark now. The night grows soft, the hum of summer crickets steady and low. Her story eases closed like a book set gently on a shelf, and you are left with the quiet, carrying her memory into your own stillness. And now, let your breath slow with the rhythm of these words. In through your nose, soft and steady. Out through your mouth, long and gentle. The rise and fall of your chest is its own lullaby, keeping time with the quiet around you. Picture yourself lying on cool grass beneath an open sky. Above, stars scatter like grains of silver dust, distant and calm. The air is soft, not too warm, not too cold, carrying the faint scent of earth after rain. Each sound is muted, softened by distance, the rustle of leaves, the low hum of crickets, the faint pulse of the night itself. The widow's story drifts away now, her secret folded into the silence of history. She has walked her miles, carried her disguise, lived her truth, and now she rests. So too can you. There is nothing left to hold tonight, nothing left to guard. The world can wait. Your body grows heavy in the best way, sinking deeper into stillness. Your thoughts loosen like knots untangling in slow water. The air moves around you, gentle, steady, safe. You are here. You are at rest. The stars above blur, soft and glowing. The sky darkens to velvet. The earth beneath you holds you steady, and you let go, sinking into quiet, sinking into sleep. Sweet dreams.